Arrogant Atheist with you again. We read with sadness the news of Lawrence Krauss. Larry, 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 Larry. What are you doing? What are you doing? I finally read this whole BuzzFeed article, and it's long as shit, man. Apparently, dude's been doing this for a long time, or allegedly. I'm not. I don't claim to know, but when you read through this, the pattern that's described there is pretty compelling, and it really accentuates the larger problem that we're having in society, the Me Too movement and the victims' rights topicality. Lately in the news, people are starting to stand up and not put up with it anymore, and the problem is that there's a huge gray area, and unfortunately, guys like Krauss are in that position where he gets groupies, he gets fans who love his work so much and love his mind and love what he does that they follow him around, and they want to be around him, and they want to meet him, and they want to take advantage of his influence perhaps in their career when they're trying to get somewhere in cosmology or physics or atheism or skepticism or secularity in general. And then they become victims of some sort or another, and it looks like it's been going on for a while. So the problem in general in the movement has been something that's been there since I got into it, and it became obvious right away that it's perceived correctly as an old white guys movement, because the people who are able to do this sort of activism tend to be old white dudes in America who have a little fear of backlash compared to others, who have the means and the platform from which to do it, compared to some folk in society, and who can be described more as libertarians or gadflies on the political scene in some ways, or attention seekers. All of these things lend itself to the fact that atheism in general, especially in the early days and on a local level, was largely male, and seen as such for potential women, potential female attendees. The little groups were just full of dudes down in the basement or in just some place where they could rent for free and meet and have a thing, and it wasn't welcoming to women. Now, and I say this, I say the grassroots level, because when you take a step back and look at the larger movement, you can point to women in the beginning and today in many positions of authority. You've got Annie Laurie in charge of FFRF. You've got Madeline Murray O'Hare, who started it all, really, with the original American Atheists crowd. She was the one, and it goes on and on. The SETCO was run by a woman until recently, maybe still is. There's Noel George at Foundation Beyond Belief. There's our friend Minga Futrell, who founded the Brights. I mean, I can go on and on about women in free thought in positions of authority at the top of national orgs, but the fact is that down here on the ground, women have a hard time, and that was a lesson I had to learn because I'm an old white dude, and it didn't dawn on me that anybody would be uncomfortable, and it never does because I'm just not uncomfortable usually. But I learned quite quickly that people are afraid to join those situations where they might be the only woman, and they might be one of a few women, and they're not very extroverted, they're not loud, they're not outgoing, aggressive people in a crowd situation, and they quite frankly feel creeped upon even just by being there. And that's not to cast aspersions on the attendees necessarily. It's just the atmosphere that they felt, and that's absolutely valid and something that we clearly needed to address right from the get-go. The gray area comes in when you think about the fact that this has gone on forever in the workplace, and it's the old Chris Rock joke. If and a lot of you probably aren't even old enough to remember the Clarence Thomas case, and Anita Hill was his accuser, and then back in the 80s when he was up for the Supreme Court, and she almost got him shot down, and probably should have, because he creeped on her to the point where it became offensive, and she tried to block him from becoming a Supreme Court justice because he was such an inappropriate dude. And the old Chris Rock joke was, if it had been Denzel Washington and not Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill never would have complained. It sounds glib, and it is, but that's one of those things. Unwanted advances are unwanted for a lot of reasons, and a lot of that reason is they're unwanted from the person they're coming from. And if a person who they are wanted from tends to make the same comment, it's not seen in the same light. So a lot of this is just some dude's inability to read body language or get a hint, take a hint, buddy. And Krauss, I've met him. I don't know him. I've interviewed him. He was cordial. He was nice. He was incredibly friendly to the crowd. I got nothing bad to say about the guy. But when you couple it in with the, kind of some of the old boys' remarks that Dawkins got in trouble about is actually part of it. Now that I read the article, it's all kind of related. Down the years, Dawkins was trying clumsily, I think, to defend Krauss in some way when he, stuck his own foot in it. Dawkins from a different generation, and just doesn't quite get why it would be offensive and why some people have to have such a thin skin. Whatever it is, it's time to adjust and get over it. Maybe you feel like people have a thin skin, but it's also not the '60s anymore when you came up. And I'm the first one to admit that I've had to learn that lesson the hard way. Not everybody's is happy to be flirted with, and that's one of those things that you get into community organizing, and you learn right away. You're not always spot on. I tend to be able to read people, and I'm not perfect at it. You make mistakes, and you apologize, and you try not to repeat those, especially with the people who are sensitive about it. So a lot of this, I think, is just working through the older generations and training up younger people, not just men, people, because women do it too. Women come to these parties and make inappropriate comments to people and get in trouble in different ways. You don't hear about sexual harassment, but when you're down here in the groups, you hear about the wife who got mad because so and so said something at a party to a married man. So it's not just women who go to places and feel creeped out on. Now I'm not trying to minimize that part, because that's the ugly part. And women who feel threatened physically because they're not big enough to fend off a crowd is different than a drunken groupie at a party flirting with dudes. And there's a balance there that we all have to kind of accept, that double standard that we all live with, because dudes don't feel like victims of sexual abuse when 5 chicks make a comment about their abs. It's just kind of not the way the world works. And if all of this is going to change, then it all has to change, is my point, I think, there. So Krauss, Jesus, dude, you're rich, buddy. You can buy it, man. I mean, you got to harass people. You got to learn to read signals. You're like one of those guys that can explain the universe in a way that makes me ashamed to have a mind, because I can only get it for like this fleeting second when you talk about it. So we need you, man, and the movement needs science. We can't lose members of the scientific community, the philosophical community, and the skeptical community to continuing allegations of improper conduct. I mean, own it. If you said something wrong to a chick, own it. It's happened, and try to move on from there. And if what you're doing is not working for you, and you end up with a bunch of pissed off women, and you really genuinely feel like you haven't done anything wrong, maybe you need to talk to somebody so that you learn how to self-assess a little bit better, or read a situation. I don't know what to tell you with that. Maybe it's maybe there's personality conditions that could get treated with therapy or chemicals. Quite honestly, it's a modern age, so I don't know what to do about the continuation of these kinds of problems in the movement, other than to do the best that I can and support the Brew City benefit coming up, where we're giving money to RAIN, trying to give something back instead of just talk, instead of just lip service. We're trying to raise money for victims of rape and shine a light continuously on the problem of sexual inappropriateness in our movement, because the movement means too much to lose it to that kind of crap. So I hope we can all do a little bit better and learn from mistakes from big guys who have taken a fall from this. All right? Thanks.